All right, good evening. So I'm here with Matthew Bio, who's my fellow LNV, my compatriot, my comrade in arms, and this is the second part of the Adversus Pharisaeos against the Pharisees series, but we're gonna pivot a little bit, and we're gonna talk about the SSPX consecrations, because I'm really interested in seeing people's reactions to the SSPX consecrations in light of their reactions or lack thereof to major controversies coming out of the Vatican, that we've all seen over the last decade or more. And the interesting, when you juxtapose people's reactions to the SSPX consecrations to their reactions or lack of reactions or downplaying of worshiping of demons and blessing gay couples and trying to enforce communion for the civilly divorced and remarried and all that stuff. It's really interesting. So Matt hasn't had as much time to review all the links that I have that I'm going to show. So you're going to get fresh reactions from Matt. But yeah, so here we are. Here we go. Are you ready, Matt?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So the first one I think is the last one I've I saw it, but I most recently looked at, and it's from E. Michael Jones. So E. Michael Jones said, there we go. So no, this is Christine Niles. Well, we can start with Christine Niles. That's fine. So Christine Niles, if y'all don't know, she used to work for Church Militant before the whole fandango. Anyway, she says, entirely unsurprising that the SSPX is giving the middle finger to the Holy See and announcing it will go forward with illicit bishop consecrations in July. She goes through the 3 conditions the CDF presented to the SSPX in 2017. That's kind of ancient history at this point. So you see that she says both these positions that she refers to imply rejection of the indefectibility of the church as the church, blah, blah, blah. And she says, per canon 1387, the bishops taking part in the consecrations will be excommunicated and the SSPX will drift farther away from the church, something it seems to want anyway. A tragedy all around. So that's interesting. Something it seems to want, she opines, that the SSPX wants to drift away from the Catholic Church. She says that they're giving the middle finger to the Holy See. Okay, so Matt, I was kind of scrolling through her content, her recent content, and she did a video with John Salza, and you know who that is, right?
Probably. I don't recall the name. I don't.
Okay, so John Salza's interesting character. He has past associations as a member of the Freemasons. Okay.
Okay.
And then he has been on both sides of the SSPX debate. And it's funny because there was an article, I think it was published on 1 Peter 5 a couple years ago. And what's interesting is they literally just took John Salza today versus John Salza a few years ago on the SSPX, and they took his arguments and had him answer each other because he's been on both sides. And in the opinion of some, his arguments for the SSPX are better than his arguments against them. But he's an interesting character because, again, he's got that weird past association with the Freemasons, and he's been on both sides of the SSPX debate, and he seems to argue better when he's arguing for the SSPX. Now he argues against the SSPX, and in one of her recent videos, let's see if I can play it. Let's see. It's in here. Here it is. This is him.
Everything would be fine. Is this about liturgy or is this about doctrine?
Well, frankly, Christine, I think ultimately it's about neither. I think this is about the fact that the society wants independence from the Roman Catholic Church. That's what I.
The society wants independence from the Roman Catholic Church. What's your opinion on that, Matt?
Well, the idea that the society wants to independent from the Catholic Church is pretty absurd, being that they have been trying to work with them at every level that they possibly could. I would say probably more than I feel is warranted. And the SSPX has gone above and beyond to try and recognize, even in the scandals that we know that the Vatican has been complicit in, among these cardinals and these bishops. I've probably met in the past 10 years, let's call it 8 years, of going to the SSPX. I've never heard a priest say anything even remotely close to that. They've all been very respectful toward the Holy See. And so when you see these articles like this girl, Christine Niles, I was able to read that one. And she doesn't talk about the current conversation happening within the church. The current conversation, the expectations of the church now of the SSPX is basically y'all have to accept Vatican II. And, for anybody who knows what the Catholic Church really is all about, Vatican II has a lot of issues, and they don't want to address those issues. Nobody wants to talk about those issues. In fact, you and I were talking a little while ago about why is it that the SSPX wants to have their own bishops, because they don't trust the hierarchy. And we've seen that with other groups that the Vatican has infiltrated. I'll call it infiltration, because they convinced some of these bishops and priests, so that, you know what, let us give you the priests and bishops that you want, and you'll get whatever you want, we'll give you. And then they cut them short. Now those groups are struggling, and they're not getting the care that they need. But in particular, you want us to accept Vatican II for everything in its entirety, or you want us to let's dialogue. We would like you to dialogue with us more. And the SSPX has gone way above what they really should be doing, in my opinion. But they're accused by people who don't know about these things. They just see headlines. These headline readers that are going, "Oh, the SSPX is they're just troublemakers. These people, they're just troublemakers. They're horrible people." But man, we'll
go ahead.
a chapel.
We'll go ahead and call them schismatics. We'll just go ahead and we'll call them schismatics.
Everybody is a schismatic if they're a trad. If they're a Protestant saying the reading, doing the reading on the altar. If it's a woman doing a reading on the altar, that's fine. If it's an altar girl, that's fine. If it's a gay guy helping out at the mass, at the altar, that's fine. But if you're saying the same mass that we've said for 2,000 years now, Mo, we have some fishy stuff going on with those trads over there.
It's super fishy. And you and I probably both we're using the word because everybody understands it. I think the word trad is gay and ridiculous. It's it's a label where obviously it's meant to be, I think, somewhat derogatory, the rad trads, all that, right? But it's like that again. This was kind of why I titled the video. The subtitle is "The Law of Charity," because it seems like the what's the objective of saying these things, like that the SSPX is giving the middle finger to the Holy See, which is okay, hyperbolic in the absurd to even try to characterize their conversations with the Holy See as giving the middle finger. Is that a charitable character? Is it even true? No, it's not true, and therefore it's obviously not charitable, but it's most certainly not charitable on its face, right? And then we have So like, let's look at the E. Michael Jones statement. This is kind of what's, again, I mentioned like people who scream schismatics about the SSPX, right? This is, and how problematic this is and like how deeply problematic it is, which is what we're going to get to in a second. So let me share this real quick. Here we go. It came up in the search results, so we'll go to that one. Boom, there it is. Here's the E. Michael Jones, see more. Okay. He says there's nothing to talk about. The cause of schism is not doctrine, it is lack of charity. And this is my favorite, you know, not to pick on E. Michael Jones, who's like a brilliant guy. I just think there's a serious lapse right here. It is lack of charity as manifested in refusal to join in communion with the church out of fear of contamination. Okay, so these are the things I want to point out. He says that refusal to join in communion with the church. Okay, we also have act of defiance, blah, 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 baptism, Donatists. Okay. His warning applies, he's talking about St. Cyprian, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. His warning applies to schismatics like the SSPX as well. I urged Bishop Williamson to end the schism. So this is the problem. Everyone knows Father Gerald Murray from EWTN, okay? Right? This is a mainstream show. I'm going to queue up. I've got it queued up. He was on Joe McClain, A Catholic Take. All right, it's queued up. I want you to listen to what he's going to say here.
So I hope and pray that they'll become reasonable in the sense that they will say, no subject that we, you know, the Holy See is, and the Pope is the supreme authority. No subject of supreme authority deprives that authority of the obedience that's required in order to be a subject. We don't do that, and that's unfortunately what's being done here.
I do find it almost comical because the debate that rages, especially online, about whether the SSPX is in schism or is not in schism, seems Cardinal Fernandez said in his first statement after the meeting that they would be in schism if they went through the consecrations, which seems to suggest they are not in schism now, at least in his mind. You would think that would put the debate to an end, no?
Well, no, they're not in schism, and the penalty that was, you know, the excommunication of the bishops was lifted, so they were the only schismatics that.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah.
Did he say that the SSPX is in schism, or did he say that the SSPX is not in schism?
Well, he's basically saying they're not in schism. How could they be in schism if they're going to be in schism?
They're going to be in schism, right? Okay.
But that is always a threat that the bishops and cardinals give, as if they were going to do it and they had the authority to do it, and they don't. So they don't have the authority to declare that he's in schism.
So right, so that's kind of what I'm pointing at here is like E. Michael Jones, Christine Niles. I remember having this conversation with somebody, and they're like insisting the SSPX is in schism, and it's like the irony is not funny at that point. The irony is not funny because the position of the Holy See is that the SSPX is not in schism. Now, they use the word partial communion.
Irregular, right?
Canonically irregular partial communion. But this is the thing. So think what you want about the term partial communion. If the Holy See does not view the SSPX as being in schism, then the SSPX is in ecclesiastical communion. So to say that they are in schism is to oppose the judgment of the Holy See. To say that the SSPX is in schism right now, if you say that, you're opposing the judgment of the Holy See. If you say that, and you know that the judgment of the Holy See is that they are not currently in schism, and you say knowingly, I refuse communion with those who attend SSPX masses. Fully knowing and willing, you say this, you have committed the delict of schism, and you are lete sententiae excommunicated.
Are these arguments, are they trying to say, like, hey, if when it comes to excommunications, some of them are automatic. Like if you are, if you were a priest that repeated a confession he heard, you would be automatically excommunicated. Is that the claim here that they would be trying to make? Is that because they did this, they are automatically in schism?
I don't know what
is that their argument that they could say?
I have no idea. This is just like what I don't know.
It is ridiculous that everybody's got these. All of a sudden, they've got these like little mini popes walking around declaiming the status of groups that they don't really even know about. I'll bet you.
Well, how many people downplayed like demon worship in the Vatican? How many people downplay like all of the times the Vatican's gone out of its way to dialogue with literal, like actual schismatics, right? Like the Orthodox, all the different Orthodox churches, because there's like 14 autonomous churches, right? Or is it 24? No, I think it's 14. So, and then also, so over Fiducia Supplicans, the Coptic Orthodox Church had ceased dialogue with the Holy See. And so Cardinal Fernandez goes out of his way to try to reinitiate dialogue with the Coptic Orthodox. Like people have completely lost their minds. They've completely lost their minds. They don't understand what's going on. They're willing to obey legitimate superiors all the way to hell. They're willing to follow legitimate superiors all the way to hell, because they will submit every other judgment to that of like this idea of absolute authority.
Well,
where it's like, yeah, go ahead.
No, there's a lot of people that are. It's crazy how there's so many people bringing this up as if it was the most pressing topic in the Catholic Church today. When just last year, the Vatican.
We're blessing gay couples. We are blessing gay couples.
That now, the confusion over that, where people are like, well, they're not actually blessing the marriage, they're blessing the individual people. It's like,
right?
Why are we acknowledging? Why aren't we raising the flag when the Vatican hosts basically a pilgrimage of LGBTQ AI plus? Why is it that we're not, when the bishop of what named the diocese has so many scandals, active scandals going on, so many badly positioned priests and bishops that shouldn't even be holding office?
Yeah,
no one wants to talk about it. Like that's actual scandals where children and I don't want to the level of scandal in the seminaries, in the priesthood, by the bishops over children. We're okay with that. In fact, we'll continue giving money to the people that are doing these things.
We're okay with the majority of the clergy being homosexual.
The rogue group, the SSPX, man, those people are some evil people.
And we can't deflect. Like, we're not going to deflect and say, oh, like, we can't deal with the issue, and like, what is it actually going to mean when they do the consecrations, all that. What I'm trying, I guess my point is this. It's like, you cannot also do, you can't say, okay, like, we owe, like, obviously, yes, I assent to this, you assent to this. We owe submission to the supreme authority of the Roman pontiff. Yes. But, and we're not Donatists, right? But we also don't ignore reality and say, okay, Tucho Fernandez is basically screaming at all of us that he's gay. All right? His nickname is Kissy, according to Gomulka. Kissy. Okay? He wrote all these creepy erotic books. Okay? That's the dude we're talking about, who's dialoguing with the SSPX. So you can't say that, and also, who was it? Karam, Sister Karam, the famous whatever. Here it is. I can share it. We can just corroborate our sources here. We can make sure. There we go. It's all here in Complicit Clergy. So yeah, and this is Father Murray again. This was back in 2025. He said Cardinal Fernandez should be fired over his pornography. Like, okay, right. So this is what's interesting. We have all this stuff about Cardinal Fernandez. I mean, goodness. I mean, if you can't laugh, you'll cry. Right? This is what we're talking about. This is the guy. This is what I was just talking about.
Yeah.
You cannot separate the fact that this is the person they have dialoguing with the SSPX, quote unquote dialoguing with. So remember, he goes out of his way to try and mend the relationship with the Coptic Church in wake of disastrous fiducia supplicans, right? But the SSPX shows up and he says, hey, you do those consecrations and you'll be in schism.
It's intentional that they send a cardinal to say those things, and it's not Leo XIV. It's very intentional.
Like, this is the guy. So let me ask everybody a question, which I've asked before, or which I've rendered as a statement before. Do we have a problem? Okay, goodness. Do we have a problem with a confusion in doctrine? Do we have a problem with modernism in the church? Or is that really just what comes out of the mouths of sodomites? Because, like, you could claim 80% of the hierarchy are just sodomites. And you can't, so what you can't say is that if they go beyond saying, oh, well, you've incurred late sententiae, the penalty of excommunication, and they make it ferende sententiae, meaning it's a declaration, like it's an imposed penalty by the Holy See. You can't say that's not colored by who is issuing the decree. You cannot say that. The hierarchy is chock full of sodomites. I mean, maybe people don't understand. Maybe some people don't know this. I don't know. I mean, read this article. If you look, I'm going to share this one. If you haven't read this article, it'll give you an introduction. The real driving force behind fiducia supplicans. If you want the summary, okay, everyone's gay. Everyone is gay. Here's the bicycle meme I was talking about. I'm not blessing the bicycle. I'm separately blessing two wheels. Right? Like, this is, everyone's gay.
I do think that, I didn't even appreciate how bad this problem was as recently as a year ago. So I can kind of speak for that. I grew up always going to the Latin Mass outside of the diocese. And I knew that there was problems there, but then you start learning about it, you start reading a little bit, you find out that there's a problem here, you find out that there's a problem there. And I think a lot of people have just kind of got their heads in the sand, and they might see, a little bit of flamboyancy, some feminism, but they're priests. Like, priests are kind of like that. you know, when you look at the priests that are saying the Latin Mass that are not in the diocese, they're much more masculine men than what you would find at the diocese. And it's not because these men aren't married, you know, they're living a different lifestyle. So that's why they're feminine. No, the reason why these men are effeminate is because of this issue of sodomation. It's the actual thing. The amount of scandal that is happening here, you don't get promoted in the Catholic Church today. I would say it's at least extremely very rare, unless there's an issue with that, because the sodomites promote each other. They've got their own people, they've got their own scandals, they control each other. It's a form of manipulation. They're not promoting the good ones. I'll tell you that. The bishops are not being promoted because they're holy and great. The most of them, not all of them, but most of them they're right there with the worst of them, and they're covering up issues. You don't have to look very far, but if you don't look, it's hard to believe, because we're talking about the Catholic Church, but it doesn't matter that all of them could be sinners. The Catholic Church still exists. However, the members, you know, all I'm trying to say is that I can understand how other people have their head in the sand, because I kind of knew there was a problem. I didn't know how bad it was, and it's a huge problem.
Well, right. I mean, it's massive. There was a study. I posted a link to the study in one of my earlier videos, and there were like 106 respondents to the study, and they were all Catholic priests, and it was over 60% of them responded that they were homosexual. But there are some estimates as high as 80%, right? In the hierarchy, like upper echelons, 80% sodomite. And when you begin to investigate this stuff, as Matt and I have had to do recently, we were looking at, let's just say, some very pertinent documentation. And it's like, dude, it's bad. Like, it's so bad. It's like, it's not even really a subculture. You couldn't even really call it a subculture. It's like the culture. If you want to be a bishop, like the culture of like bishop candidacy is homosexuality. Like, that is what it is. It is that. If you want to be a bishop, like, let's just say it's really going to help out if you're gay. You know?
Let's just say it's really going to help out if you don't say anything against it. That would be gay.
Minimum.
That would be gay. if you go along with it, right, we'll be best friends. If you go along with whatever's happening behind closed doors and in front of others, we'll be fine. Everything will be fine. But the moment you speak out, suddenly you're a problem, and you're listed as such, and you know, seminarians are being kicked out and so forth.
Right. So then we end up with the seminarians who are left, and then we have the like completely ignorant seminarians who are good guys who make it through somehow, right? And then we have probably seminarians that just keep their heads down. And I just put them with the sodomites. Like, if you keep your head down and you don't say anything, you're just on that team. You're on the sodomite team. And that's still in power in the church. But to go back to like the whole schismatic thing, this is what's really interesting. You may have heard of this, Matt. I'm going to share this with you. So Gerald Murray, right, again, famous canonist, EWTN commentator on the Prayerful Posse with Raymond Arroyo, right? Okay, this is the same guy. I'm going to share this. So this was a thesis that he wrote in 1995. What was his conclusion? Here it is. Let's just look at the conclusion that he comes to. Here's a quotation from it. An examination of the circumstances in which Archbishop Lefebvre proceeded to consecrate bishops in light of canons 1321, 1323, and 1324, raises at least a significant doubt, if not a reasonable certainty, against the validity of the declaration of excommunication pronounced by the Congregation of Bishops. Now, he's taking attack now, saying, it sounds like Father Murray is like, yeah, they'll be excommunicated, they'll be in schism. But in 1995, when he wrote this thesis, he was at the Pontifical Academy Gregorian, I think, at the time. An examination of the circumstances which Archbishop Lefebvre proceeded to consecrate bishops in light of canons 1321, 1323, and 1324 raises at least a significant doubt, if not a reasonable certainty, against the validity of the declaration of excommunication pronounced by the Congregation of Bishops. So that's interesting, isn't it? So this is, again, like, there's no charity for the traditional Latin Mass. There's no charity for Catholics who assist at the traditional Latin Mass. What I see is people like chomping at the bit, and they can't wait to pin those trads against the wall and say, ha, finally, I always thought you were schismatic. Finally, yeah, you're all going to be excommunicated. Yes. Yes, finally. Finally, we can shut the stupid trads up, And it's like, do you realize, like, a lot of the people who end up at the traditional Latin Mass, they end up like that becomes like this conflict in their family, especially if they start going to the Society of St. Pius X masses. That becomes this like they lose friends, they lose family relationships because they've made that decision. Do you think that they make the decision lightly? These are the most sincere Catholics you will ever meet. They get maligned and characterized as like these rigid. Remember, Francis is famous. Oh, rigidity is like the greatest sin ever. It's like, no, these are the most sincere people who are literally just trying to save their souls. And so they bring their families to the traditional Latin Mass because they know that they're receiving the authenticity of the Catholic faith. And they're suffering probably more than anybody else right now. And the one thing that they're going to suffer more acutely than anyone else is whatever happens after July 1st. Because so many people just don't know they don't know what they're going to do, and they don't know what to do.
I think over time,
the worst possible thing would be to be in schism. That'd be the worst possible thing. And so how do you... So you're going to have people with split consciences, and they're not going to know what to do. Because all they want to do is be Catholic. All they want to do in the depths of their hearts is be Catholic. And what? Is the accusation then going to be, you have no charity? From the people who have no charity.
I think that will be the case for a lot of people, but I also, you bring up a good point that there's a lot of families that are going to suffer over this, and probably a lot of fathers that are on their knees saying, if they do this, these cardinals are making these blanket statements against the SSPX, and these guys are kneeling down on the ground and they're praying at night, and they're going, what am I going to do? This is my family that, could be in schism if they follow the SSPX. And that's the intention of the statements that are being made by these people that are influencers, not just cardinals, Fernandez and others, not just bishops, not just some of these priests, but just these lay people that are Instagram, social media people that are making these statements that they clearly don't understand the matter of subject regarding tradition and the church itself. regarding saving souls and the differences between Vatican II and non-Vatican II practices, specifically against that are specifically changes in the Mass, whether they're doctrinal or not. In this case, doesn't really matter, because if it's not Catholic, it's not doctrinal. And but these fathers would suffer, these women and these fathers, mothers, grandparents, they will suffer for these statements that are being made, not because they would actually be in schism, but because people will make them feel like they're in schism, and no one wants to appear to be in scandal. It's not correct to appear to be in scandal. So to put this on people as if you continue to support the SSPX and go to their masses, you will be in scandal, is in itself a great injustice. And those people need to stop making those statements. I'm really glad you brought that.
It's like a lot of people who need to like step back and think like, why, you know, I've let my entire Catholic faith go if I submit to everything that has come out of Rome for the past 2 decades, let's say, maybe longer. I submit to everything without questioning it. Right. I'm talking about the times when it's obviously contrary to the Catholic faith. Like, we cannot give communion to divorced people who are civilly remarried, who are validly married to somebody else. We cannot bless gay couples. We cannot do these things. Like, I witnessed. Okay, so recently I saw a post from the Archdiocese of New Orleans where there was like an ecumenical prayer meeting. And then there was like another one last year. It's like, you can't even, this is like sacrilege. There was like a Protestant dude preaching inside a Catholic church. Like this, we are in insane times, okay? But if you're willing to say all that, I accept all of that. I accept everything that's not Catholic too, so that I can unjustly and pridefully deny the law of charity when it comes to the SSPX and the very difficult situation they're in, and all the faithful who go to their masses. How many faithful go to SSPX masses in the US right now?
I actually don't know. It's probably about 30,000. It's got to be more than that.
Yeah, 25 to 30,000. So let's say 25 to 30,000 Catholics, right? 25 to 30,000 Catholics go to SSPX masses. You can't, by the way, you can't be a member of the SSPX. You just go to their masses.
The point of
sorry, go ahead.
The point of modernism is to create confusion.
Yes. Well, I would argue that it's the point of sodomy. But yeah, modernism being downstream of sodomy, in my opinion.
So, I mean, you know, there needs to be, I think it's up to the people at this point. The people have to figure out that without the church in its strongest, without practicing the church's strongest and most deepest, what's the word, practices, we will continue to be closing down churches in the United States. I mean, there were a lot more churches, priests, and bishops before Vatican II, and there's been so many souls lost. There was a parish, there was a priest in Lafayette, not a priest, I'm sorry, a preacher, First Baptist, Sanders, I believe, I don't remember his name. He would brag that his church was filled with Catholics. He's a First Baptist guy. He would brag, oh, you know, my mega church. My church is filled with Catholics. We've got them here. We took them from the Catholic Church. because the people believe in what the Protestants are feeding them, because they don't believe that they're getting what they need out of the Catholic Church, because they stopped serving the people. And
well, yeah, it's probably bad when you're at a liberal parish and you hear more Catholicism at the Protestant building down the street. I mean, plenty of heresy too, but you know what I mean. So I guess we could probably close on this. I think that this statement was probably the most succinct, and it was from, it was from Kwasniewski. So here it is. The reaction to yesterday's news about the SSPX Episcopal consecrations on July 1st has brought forth a tidal wave of commentary, often very one-sided. Perhaps the most consistent message from those who consider themselves guardians of law and order is the following, and this is a quotation from an article I read this morning. Obedience to legitimate authority, even when you are convinced, or even have airtight reasoning, to suggest that authority is misguided, is a surer path to holiness than being right. In the spiritual life of any Catholic, and certainly in the life of a religious under vows, obedience plays a crucial role. However, I would like to suggest that looking at Catholicism in 2026, this kind of messaging is at best tone deaf and quite misses the forest for the trees. For a priest who has been celebrating the traditional liturgy for years with a dedicated congregation, or even all by himself, to cease offering it simply because his bishop tells him to, is not virtuous obedience. It's playing fast and loose with the spiritual lives of the faithful and their most intimate core. It's playing fast and loose with the greatest goods of the church, deemed sacred and great one day, but now dangerous and forbidden the next. This is not the fair virtue of obedience. It is spiritual abuse of priests and their flocks alike. What's happening in places like Chicago, Detroit, Charlotte, Knoxville, San Antonio, Austin, Monterey, and many others is a kind of spiritual theft, a violence done to real people. There's a reason the laity's trust in their clergy, and especially their bishops, is at an all-time low. After waves of sex abuse cover-up, McCarrick, anyone? Side note, I think New York Diocese is like doing a $300 million settlement right now or something. Anyway, then COVID insanity, and finally Traditionis Custodes. We are just fed up with the gaslighting, with being told, shut up and obey, it's for your own good. And all the evidence screams the contrary. The paper-thin scholasticism by which our ecclesiastical police try to hold up the tottering structure is not only unconvincing but offensive. It's worth pointing out again and again that the reason we still have the TLM in 2026 is that enough clergy and laity in the 1970s and beyond were willing to be disobedient at some level to what they were told they must do. They refused to get with the program when they believed it was a disastrous failure in prudential governance on the part of church leaders. If everyone had gone along obediently with the plan, the venerable Roman Rite would have disappeared from the face of the earth, would have been a barely remembered museum piece or academic footnote. Thanks be to God for the mental clarity, moral courage, and spiritual zeal of those who would not, could not let that happen. Someone wrote to me that today's situation is vastly different from 1988's because the traditional liturgy is much more freely available to us. Leaving aside the important fact that this struggle concerns far more than the liturgy alone, I replied that the crisis is by no means over. The church still bleeds far more members than she gains. The liturgy is stuck in habitual mediocrity, if not worse. The traditional rite has been canceled all over the place, leaving whole communities bereft. Side note, Bishop Martin, anyone, of Charlotte? The errors and evils of the last pontificate remain officially accepted and uncondemned. The scourge of homosexuality reigns unchecked in many quarters. Understatement, maybe. Maybe understatement. The battle between fundamentally incompatible paradigms has reached feverish intensity, and therefore the need for the SSPX's work around the world. Remember, they are often the only ones in an entire country who provide the traditional sacramental rites, catechesis, and preaching, has not lessened, but greatly increased. Now, nothing of what I've said automatically justifies the SSPX's forthcoming consecrations. One could agree with everything I've just written and still say they shouldn't take that step. However, no matter what you think about that, truth itself demands the following admission on the part of the church's hierarchy from the Pope on down, and if they were to give it in all humility, then reconciliation with the SSPX would happen as a matter of course. And I think that this is the encapsulating statement maybe of the century. It is our wretched negligence, reckless squandering of the church's patrimony, and decades-long abuse of the faithful that has called the SSPX into being and nourished it with fuel. It is entirely our responsibility to put an end to the disastrous situation that compels so many Catholics to look outside ordinary structures for bread instead of stones, fish instead of serpents. When they say that and follow through, when that is, they live up to the most basic obligations of their offices, then count me the most enthusiastic proponent of obedience. Until then, the stance of recognize and resist is entirely justified. After all, duties and rights are correlative. That is built into the nature of things. If we have a duty to obey, the clergy and especially bishops have a duty to teach the Catholic faith and nourish us with the fullness of our tradition.
Yeah, that about wraps it up.
That about wraps it up. I would just say, like, this is the thing. What is obedience? I think that's the question we all need to be asking. What is obedience, right? So, like, and I'm not saying I have the answer. That's not my point in saying this. I don't have the answer. But what I'm saying is that's the question we have to ask, because the Pope is bound by his office. The bishops are bound by the office. Priests are bound by their office. I'm bound by my office. We're all bound by our office. It's not the other way around. We can't just take the office and like manipulate it and change it and make it what we want it to be so it's convenient for us. The Pope is bound to promulgate and preserve the tradition, the true faith. That is what he's bound to do. He has to do it. He doesn't have any other option. It's literally, that is what the papacy is. That's why we have a distinction between persona privata, Jorge Bergoglio, for instance, and officium or munus. The persona privata can go out and say, hey, everybody go have gay sex, right? But the office doesn't permit it. So in faithful obedience to the office, you say, no, I'm sorry, persona privata, I have to obey the office of the papacy and reject what you, though being the supreme pontiff, have told me to do. In this particular case,
You can't in good conscience follow somebody into sin, like you were saying earlier. These people that are going to the SSPX, living out their Catholic faith, are acting in good conscience because they believe that this is the best route for them to save their soul.
right? And we violate our consciences at our own peril. Conscience isn't the supreme thing. It has to be well-formed. But if you're operating under a well-formed Catholic conscience, it's a grave, grave matter to say, like, oh, I'm going to violate my conscience, right? That's a serious thing. So I think, again, I'm just calling for charity. Like, these are real people and real families who are just trying to live out their Catholic faith. And now they're faced with this, when the SSPX would be the last possible group that should ever have been communicated in such a disrespectful way, communicated with in such a disrespectful way by a representative of the Holy See, who is apparently screaming that he's gay. So that's the situation we're in. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm just saying, if you're willing to overlook all of the scandal of the last 2 decades or more coming out of Rome in order to scream at the SSPX, finally, you schismatic retards are going to be excommunicated, then, man, like, I don't know, things aren't looking good for you.
To hope something like that on somebody, like, you're not even supposed to wish that Hitler went to hell.
No,
because you take his soul.
So where is the, if you're trying to show people, for instance, that the true Catholic faith is whatever you have, then the first expression of that might need to be something like a little bit of charity.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well
so
said.
the law of charity, and then again, like, there's a reason why all of the bishops, the majority of the bishops, hate tradition. It's time for us as laity to look into that and look into it really hard, because we have the authority to do something about it. When clerics become enemies of the commonwealth. And therefore, as I like to say, emissaries of hell. But anyway, anything else, Matt? What you got?
I'm good,
Hit us
man.
hard
I
with
think
hard with like one sentence that we're all going to remember the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I'm not the guy to say it. I don't know. We all need to be praying.
There it is.
We all need to be praying for all of our leaders.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can all pray together in union as Christians to our Blessed Mother to guide us through this storm. But anyway, well, God bless you all. Good night. I'm going to stop the stream